Welcome to the Front 7 Podcast. I am your host, Money Mike, and it is draft week with the 2017 NFL Draft kicking off this Thursday night with the first round and days 2 and 3, Friday and Saturday, as we will get through all 7 rounds and the teams will start to come together just a little bit more. And we'll have more of an idea of what the teams will look like in September when the 2017 NFL season kicks off. But today, in a series of videos leading up to Thursday night, I will be discussing multiple takes on the draft. I'll give opinions on certain subjects. So please subscribe to my channel if you have not done so already, because I will be discussing the draft all this week leading up to the start of the draft. And Friday and Saturday, one of those days, I will have my live reaction to the 2017 NFL Draft first round reaction on Friday or Saturday. You know, it's going to be a basic video. I will have the TV on with the sound off, and as the draft is happening, I will record my reaction depending on how much time I have to edit the video. It might be even on Sunday. It might be a two-parter because it is going to be a very long night on Thursday night. Now, today we are going to look at the Cleveland Browns. You know, as the title of this video says, and maybe I'll change the title of the video to something else by the time I post this, but as the title says, will the Browns once again screw up the draft? Because essentially right now you hear the rumors, they're kind of deciding, they're mixed. You hear these reports saying the coaches want Myles Garrett, who for months has been the projected number 1 overall pick. The owner, Jimmy Haslam, and the rest of the front office wants a quarterback. Now, I'll get into the whole quarterback discussion later on, as I want to essentially just talk about the Browns and their failures at the draft in recent years. But it does seem to me, you know, the Browns once again, you know, granted, you know, we hear the phrase, the same old Browns, or, well, they're the Browns, of course they're going to screw it up, but, I mean, when you look at this year's quarterback class, honestly, I'm not a big fan of it. I've seen a lot of people online, they're not a fan of it. Even some of the analysts, they're not a fan of this draft class, including Mike Mayock, who essentially has said that there is no first-round quarterbacks in this draft class. I don't see a quarterback in this class that I would say is a first-round quarterback. Now, he did say that there is first-round talent, but they're just not worthy of being in the first round, I guess is what he's trying to say, and being drafted in the first round. Now, he did say that someone has said to him, you know what, Mike, I agree with you 100%. If the draft started at pick number 33 for quarterbacks, I think we all would be happy. I think we'd all be happy. And I think mostly he's talking about the fact that when you draft somebody in the first round, you expect them to contribute right away, especially a quarterback. You expect him as a rookie to come in, be the starter right away, because that's why you take him in the first round over every other position, every other need, and because you think that he's going to be a guy that can be a game changer for your franchise, and so you take him and you start him from day one. But Mike Mayock basically is saying that in this draft class, there's nobody there that's worthy of starting on day one, which I think when you look at the draft, I think one of the things about it is that you look at teams like Arizona, I think the Jets, where you have, they signed Josh McCown. Arizona has Carson Palmer. So they're not going to be expected to really contribute from day one. if they were drafted to those teams. So when you look at Patrick Mahomes, you look at Deshaun Watson, if they were to land in New York or Arizona, they would not have to start right away. And even in Chicago, if the Bears wanted to give a year to Deshaun Watson or Mitchell Trubisky or whoever, they did give a lot of money to Mike Glennon. So maybe he was sit for a year, but if Glennon struggles, we might see that rookie quarterback come off the bench. Same thing with Arizona and New York, where they wouldn't have to contribute right away. They can learn the playbook for a year or so, and then play when they're ready. And I think that's really the best bet, I think, for Cleveland. Is you look at Cleveland, they have Brock Osweiler. I think personally maybe go with Brock Osweiler for a year or two. If he struggles, put in Cody Kessler, who they drafted last year. If not, you're in a position to draft Sam Darnold or even Josh Rosen in next year's draft, who I think personally is going to be a whole lot more better talent-wise and are true legit franchise quarterbacks. When I look at Josh Rosen and I look at Sam Darnold, both of them I think are the game-changing franchise quarterbacks that I think teams are looking for, but they're not eligible for the draft until next year. So I think if Cleveland wanted to, they're probably going to have a high pick again next year. So I think maybe wait out on it. I mean, Mike Mayock is even saying, he's not a fan of this draft class. Even John Clayton of ESPN has echoed the same sentiments that Mike Mayock has said. The options, particularly if Jimmy Garoppolo, as Adam Schefter has been reporting that he is not going to be traded, this is just a bad year to be looking for a quarterback. That's according to John Clayton. That's not paralyzing, but it just shows you. The measurables don't add up. If you take a quarterback higher than 9, well, guess what? You may be getting somebody that might be good, but you don't know. And this was from an interview from the Combine where he mentioned the measurables, the height, small hands, things like that. But, we've seen Russell Wilson. He's short, but he's had success in Seattle. Won a Super Bowl. So, the height thing is just more of a preference, I guess you could say, for most teams. Because if you take a quarterback high and he doesn't pan out, it's going to set you back for years because you have to give him time to develop. You have to give him a chance. If you miss high and you miss high, if you miss and you miss high, it's going to cost you, Clayton added. And again, he does not see any quarterbacks warranting a first-round selection in this draft. And I think, honestly, when even the analysts are even skeptical of the draft class and the quarterbacks, of the quarterbacks in this draft, I think that's even a bad sign. To me, I think really the Browns are setting themselves up for really nothing to come out of it if they were to do the unthinkable and do pass on Myles Garrett for a quarterback. And I've seen many, we see quarterbacks get overdrafted because the NFL has put so much emphasis on the quarterback position, and if you don't have a quarterback, your season is pretty much shot. And if you don't believe me, look at last year with the Oakland Raiders when Derek Carr went down and they lost him for the season. The Raiders, they were in prime position to win the number 1 seed, and potentially, probably, most likely, I think, if Derek Carr did not get injured, we probably would have had a rematch of the Tuck Rule game in Oakland between the Patriots and the Raiders. Just like we'll see this season when the Raiders and the Patriots play in Mexico City. We'll see that game. What we probably should have seen in the AFC Championship game last year if Carr wasn't injured. And for the Raiders, their season went down the drain. I mean, they had to start Connor Cook after Matt McGloin got injured in the playoffs. So, essentially, it's important to have a quarterback if you're going to be a Super Bowl contending team in the NFL. And that's the one thing the Browns have constantly messed up over the years. And you have to wonder, one of these years, they're going to get it right. Is this the year? Jimmy Haslam is pushing for a quarterback, whether that's going to be Mitch Trubisky, which is what I'm hearing is that he is trying to force the decision of drafting Mitch Trubisky on the coaches and force him onto the coaches who prefer Myles Garrett. And we saw how that worked out in 2014. Johnny Manziel had fallen down the draft board. Everybody was surprised when the Jaguars took Blake Bortles over Manziel. It was like, oh my gosh. Because Manziel was like the overhyped Tim Tebow of the 2014 draft. They couldn't stop talking about him, and it was like, oh my gosh. When Blake Bortles got selected, it was like, oh my gosh, how did Johnny not be the first quarterback off the board? So Manziel slipped, and he fell down the board. And at the infamous pick number 22, the Cleveland Browns traded up. They took Johnny Manziel at the advice of not a homeless man, as some would say, but at the ruling of Jimmy Haslam, who wanted Manziel in Cleveland and forced the trade with the Eagles to move up to 22 and take Manziel, and we saw how that worked out. This year, I don't see a quarterback worthy of taking number one. Personally, when I look at the Browns, they let all their people go last year in free agency. And you look at Alex Mack, you look at TJ Ward, you look at the guys that they let go. Mitchell Schwartz is another one. He signed with Kansas City. And even with the quarterback, right now, they are not in a stable position where they are a quarterback away from becoming a contender. And if they waste a pick on a quarterback again this year, you have to wonder, when will the Browns realize you have to build the foundation of the house before you move into it? You can't just go and be like, okay, we're going to take Mitch Trubisky, but he's going to come into this house that's not even built. I mean, essentially what I'm trying to get at is like, you don't buy a home before it's built. So essentially for me, when I look at it, the Browns will be wasting another pick on a quarterback, and they'll be drafting somebody else, 2020, 2021, whatever the case may be. If Trubisky or whoever they take, if they don't take Myles Garrett, becomes another bust and joins that long list of Cleveland quarterbacks that have failed and that have yet to turn around the Cleveland Browns. I think, to me, the defensive talent in this first round is too good to pass up. The quarterback class is not, say, where the 2012 draft class was, where you can get like two or three guys in the first round that are going to be good starters for you. Now, granted, Robert Griffin didn't work out for the Redskins, but Tannehill's done decent enough with the Dolphins. Andrew Luck's Andrew Luck. Nick Foles even showed a little bit when he was a starter. I mean, Kirk Cousins has turned out pretty good, I think. He's got the Redskins 2 years in a row in the playoffs. Now, whether or not that's going to be 3 years or not, it's going to be interesting to see. Maybe Kirk Cousins still gets traded, but it's not that caliber of a class this year. If the Browns were to take a quarterback, I really think it's just going to continue their long line of failure after failure after failure in taking a quarterback and him not working out. Because the foundation is not there. I think for Cleveland, they need to build the foundation. They need to get the front seven together. Now they're switching to the 4-3. They hired Greg Williams in the offseason, so they're switching to the 4-3. And to me, Myles Garrett is perfect for that. Now there is a rumor out there that says the Browns and the Jets have talked about a trade up to 6, maybe 5, with the Titans, I've heard. We know there's rumors of the Bears and the 49ers are desperate to trade down. I mean, desperate might be a little bit too much. That might be kind of showing their hands a little bit too much. So the Browns could trade up from number 12 to, 2, 3, maybe 5, 6, something like that. And get Garrett at number 1 and still get Trubisky or get Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes, who is rising up the draft boards as we get closer to the draft. And there's been talk that even Patrick Mahomes, he might be a surprise selection at 13 for the Arizona Cardinals. The Bills, they need a quarterback. They could take Deshaun Watson. The Bears apparently like Deshaun Watson, even though they're not really showing the interest publicly. But remember, Jay Cutler, when he was drafted by the Broncos, he never met with the Broncos leading up to the draft. So the Bears could be hiding their intentions, or at least trying to hide their intention of taking Watson at 3, when I think everybody's projecting them to take a safety in either Jamal Adams or Malik Hooker or even Marshawn Lattimore, the cornerback out of Ohio State. So, to me, right now this draft is pretty wide open. We don't really know who's going where, because now with the rumors that the Browns are considering Trubisky at number 1, now it's not really a lock that Myles Garrett will go number 1 overall, like we all thought leading up to the draft. Now the Browns could screw it up, take Garrett, or take Trubisky over Garrett, and maybe the 49ers can get Myles Garrett. I mean, they're switching to a 4-3 as well. They're switching to a similar scheme that the Seahawks use. So, they're trying to rebuild their team over there. Kyle Shanahan wants to recreate what he had in Atlanta with Dan Quinn coming from Seattle and using that defensive scheme, which is the smart thing to do because obviously it works. So when you look back at the Browns draft history, it's absolutely amazing how they've reached for quarterbacks. And again, I go back to what I said earlier, that I think a lot of this is because the NFL has put so much emphasis on quarterback that it does force teams to overdraft quarterbacks, and I will discuss that later on this week in another video, because the overdrafting of quarterbacks is another podcast in itself. The Cleveland Browns have done that so much. They've took Brandon Weeden. He was overdrafted in 2012, and ironically, somehow they end up, seemingly, it seems like every other year, they seemingly have 2 draft picks in the first round. And oddly enough, it seems to me when the Browns have 2 first-round picks, they do end up taking a quarterback. We saw that in 2007 when they took Joe Thomas and then came back and got Brady Quinn at the infamous pick 22. In 2012, they had 2 first-round picks. Both of them were bust. Trent Richardson, who was out of the league, and that infamous pick 22, Brandon Weeden. So, to me, Browns history says they're going to screw this up. And they're going to screw it up by taking either Mitch Trubisky at number 1 and passing on Garrett, or they're going to take Garrett and then give up a bunch of picks that they need to build a team for a quarterback like Mitch Trubisky or Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes, whoever that may be. I'm not ruling anything out because this quarterback class this year is about equal. I don't really see any separation between the gap of the talent between the quarterbacks. I think either way you're looking at quarterbacks that are probably not going to be good. I don't see an Andrew Luck in this draft class. I don't see a Ryan Tannehill in this draft class. But I do think there's a quarterback in this draft class that I personally think will be drafted in the first round. and that's Cal's David Webb. I think he's the only one that I like in this draft class out of the quarterbacks, and he could very well be overdrafted, and he could find himself in the first round on Thursday night just because he's a quarterback. Personally, this reminds me of the 2011 draft class. I don't see a Cam Newton in this draft class that we can look back at the 2011, because when you look at the 2011 draft, okay, Andy Dalton's become a good starter for the Bengals. Cam Newton, but that's pretty much about it. And when you look back at the rest of the 2011 draft, I mean, Cam Newton, Andy Dalton has become pretty much the only quarterbacks that have done anything in the league from this draft class when you look at it. And when you look at the 2011 draft, as I said, Cam Newton, Andy Dalton, pretty much the only two successful ones. Christian Ponder, I don't think he's on the team anymore. Blaine Gabbert is a backup. Jake Locker retired at a young age. Kaepernick's out of the league. Whether or not he's being blackballed out of the league, I mean, that's your opinion. Whatever the case may be. I mean, that's pretty much about it. I mean, Tyrod Taylor out of the 2011 draft is the only other notable starter that came out of that draft. And I see a lot of the 2011 quarterback draft class in this year's draft class. And I think, to me, the Browns, they seem poised to mess this up. I don't know why, but I have this feeling the Browns are going to mess this up. And to me, this is going to lead into my discussion for whether quarterbacks are overvalued and overdrafted in the draft. But to me, I think the answer to this question of whether the Browns will screw this up, I would say give it a good yes. Yes, they will, because that's what the Browns do. And once again, guarantee you this much right now. Hugh Jackson will not be the head coach, and their front office will once again be cleaned out the next time they draft a quarterback in the first round. After they draft a quarterback in the first round this year. Maybe the Browns have finally figured something out. Maybe the baseball analytics are going to work for them. And just maybe Mitch Trubisky is going to work out. With Hugh Jackson being a quarterback guru, it might work out. Maybe Deshaun Watson, whoever the Browns take, maybe it will work out. And the Browns will finally start working their way up back to relevancy in the NFL. And believe me, Cleveland Browns fans have suffered enough. I think it's been well documented how much the Browns have suffocated their own fans over the years since they returned to the league. And the Browns fans just want to see a winning team, a team that goes in the right direction, instead of the constant revolving door of coaches, general managers, front offices, owners, all this. And just maybe on Thursday night, maybe the Cleveland Browns won't mess this up by taking Mitch Trubisky, or Mitchell Trubisky, as he would prefer to be called, even though I've been calling him Mitch the entire time. So maybe they'll take Mitchell Trubisky, number one, pass on Myles Garrett, or even trade up with the 49ers in hopes of giving them a boatload so they don't take Myles Garrett, and you can have your cake and eat it too. This has been the Front 7 Podcast. I've been your host, Money Mike. This was a look at what the Cleveland Browns and their draft history and whether or not they will screw up on Thursday night when we kick off the 2017 NFL Draft. I'll be back with more videos, more podcasts leading up to the 2017 NFL Draft and my next podcast discussion, as I mentioned earlier, the overdrafting and overvaluing of quarterbacks.